Hello, it's Michael Laxer. I'm the editor of The Left Chapter, coming to you on a very drab and dreary Sunday afternoon in Toronto, March 22nd. Hopefully, it's a little bit nicer in whatever part of the world you're in today. So, without any further ado, let's cut to the chase because I wanted to talk about three different essential things. Well, two of them more essential than the other one, but I wanted to talk today about the ongoing war in against Iran by the United States and Israel. Wanted to talk about the increasingly desperate situation in Cuba, but also the heroic resistance, ongoing resistance of the Cuban people against the attempts again by the United States to strangle the country and the revolution. And finally, I wanted to briefly touch on something that would not be of as much interest to our international readers and viewers, but is of some importance to our Canadian ones, especially those on the left, which is the ongoing farce that is the NDP, New Democratic Party leadership race. Well, to begin with, let's talk about what's going on in Iran. It's interesting the dynamic that's unfolding there because, of course, if you were to read things that are being said by Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, and their various sycophants and cabals, as well as many of their supporters within the mainstream media who dutifully just regurgitate whatever talking points it is that they cough up without much challenge, although there is more and more challenge coming to some of the narratives that are unfolding. But if you were to take what they're saying at face value and have been saying essentially since day one of this onslaught that they've unleashed against Iran, you would think that this was all over. I mean, Trump is literally, he's going on and on every day about how the American military has annihilated all of its various targets, how it's ahead of schedule, how it's achieving all of its objectives, how Iran has no air force, has no navy, how they can, annihilate parts of the country at will, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, he's doing so in an increasingly hysterical way. But this is in complete contrast to what's actually happening because it's obvious that Iran has not as yet been defeated in this war in the battlefield. In fact, of course, the Iranians, after various attacks by Israel on their nuclear facilities and threats to attack new levels of infrastructure and power plants, etc., the Iranians hit hard on two Israeli centers yesterday, resulting in at least hundreds of injuries, possibly deaths. That's always a bit unclear. You never really find out until well after the fact with anything going on in the case of Israel because of their wartime censorship rules. So, but we know that Iran every single day continues to hit Israel and Israeli forces and Israeli centers hard, and that they also continue to hit their infrastructure within the Arab states, and that they continue to strike at American interests and American bases. So clearly, what the narrative that they are defeated, that they've been wiped out, that they're on, that the United States and Israel are on the verge of wrapping everything up and on the verge of complete and total victory, has the reek of when Bush, that idiot Bush, got up on the deck of the aircraft carrier with the giant mission accomplished banner behind him in one of the all-time great, you know, farcical moments, which proved to be entirely untrue, since many years later and many thousands of American soldiers' deaths and hundreds of thousands of Iraqi deaths later, the mission was very far from accomplished, and arguably, of course, was never accomplished at all. But going back to the situation in Iran, you have a situation where the Americans, without any clear objectives, especially since they told us last year that the Iranian nuclear program had already been all but wiped out, got into this conflict pretty obviously at the behest of Israel, with no meaningful goal in sight other than regime change, which is clearly not happening. And now, as it drags on and on and on, and as increasingly it becomes perfectly obvious that Iran can hit back at will, and perhaps even harder than it has to date, you realize that the Americans have gotten themselves into a real shit show, and that the imperial nature of the regime and Trump's ego and the sycophants around him will be completely unwilling to admit that they don't have any obvious off ramp, they have no obvious exit, they have no obvious goals anymore that they're aiming to achieve, and there's nothing that they can meaningfully achieve without putting boots on the ground, which would require hundreds of thousands of American soldiers and would unquestionably result in the deaths of tens of thousands of them. So, you're in a situation where the whole thing is increasingly a kind of dangerous, bizarre farce. If you go on to the left chapter, what you will find, Vijay Prashad actually wrote an excellent piece that we published the other day regarding this situation, in which he actually says, when pretty much outright, that Iran will win the war. I mean, that's in fact the title of the piece. And he gives 6 reasons for this. The first is that the first aspect of why the Iranians will and are winning the war is that regime change has clearly not been accomplished. And in fact, you can make the argument that the Iranian government has probably become more hardline. Also, that the Iranians are fighting back asymmetrically. That it has resulted in the attack on Iran has resulted in serious diplomatic issues across the Middle East for the United States and for Israel. You have the fact that it's showing the limits of American military power when it comes to trying to achieve all of its alleged objectives through airstrikes, something that you really can't do, and on and on from there. So I think that, and I've argued this in various posts that I've made on Facebook, that for Iran to achieve a tactical victory, all it has to do is survive and to continue to be able to inflict economic and actual damage on the United States and Israel for an indeterminate period of time. And it appears to be completely capable of doing both of those things, which would ultimately result in an Iranian tactical victory, because at some point the United States is going to have to, they're going to have to stop. It can't, the war cannot continue indefinitely, and the American public had no appetite for it going in, and will have a decreasing appetite for it as it goes along, as the American public quite rightfully has had in every single war. And this war has been notably unpopular from the very start, and its popularity is going to go nowhere but down. So, that is I think that it's pretty worthwhile to check out Vijay Prasad's piece about why he believes Iran will win the war, and also to keep in mind as you watch the increasingly, as I've already said, hysterical outbursts of the American president and those around him, that these outbursts and that these over-the-top hysterical statements and posts are clearly the rantings of people who are losing, forces and powers, and people who are winning in such conflicts and in such situations don't actually react the way that the American powers that be are reacting, and they don't, for the obvious reason that they don't need to. A lot of the posts that Trump are making are pretty clearly meant to reassure himself, in addition to his base. And while the war is widely unpopular with the broader American public, MAGA is to a large degree sticking behind him for now, according to all the polls. but even he, somewhere deep down inside what's left of his mind, must know that that won't continue indefinitely. Now, moving from Donald Trump's demented attack on Iran and his rantings about that country, we have to go to the situation confronting Cuba. Revolutionary Cuba has had solidarity and has acted in solidarity in any number of ways with countries around the world since the triumph of the revolution. International solidarity with other countries, and especially with countries in the global south, has been a pillar of the Cuban Revolution from day one. One of its remarkable aspects is the degree to which they have been willing to, even at moments that were very difficult for them, to stand up and be counted internationally, and to step up in moments like in Angola, back against apartheid South Africa, with their the medical brigades, which unfortunately the Americans have been diplomatically pushing countries to kick out and expel, and sadly some have responded. For example, recently Jamaica, which after 50 years of receiving services from Cuban doctors, which were essential in for medicine in Jamaica over the course of those decades, has responded to American pressure on bended knee and kicked the Cuban doctors out of the country, which is without any sort of foreseeable or meaningful plan in place to replace them. And Jamaica is not the only country to do this. I'm only mentioning them specifically because they're the one who did it the most recently. So, the situation now with the total oil blockade and what can only be called a sort of semi-betrayal by Mexico, which has capitulated to this oil blockade by ending fuel shipments to Cuba. And now, of course, to the Mexican government's credit and to their president's credit, they have continued with humanitarian aid shipments and have publicly said that they're trying to seek a way to send fuel to Cuba that would not result in harm to Mexico and the Mexican economy. But having said that, Cuba's been there for other countries, no matter the consequences for Cuba, countless times. And it is essential at some point for other countries around the world to band together and to break this American embargo and send fuel to the island, irrespective of the consequences, which wouldn't necessarily be, any real in any meaningful way. I mean, the Trump threats of tariffs are often paper tiger threats, because the tariffs, the chickens are coming home to roost with those tariffs in a way. I mean, they have resulted in nothing but higher prices for Americans. And there's only a certain extent to which Trump can push these tariffs. So, if countries united sort of some people argue that the Americans might militarily intercept shipments, but that's incredibly unlikely if they're actually under the flag of Mexico or other countries such as China and Russia. And clearly these countries need to be stepping up. But Cuba, the portrayal that you often will see in the Western press and in the mainstream media in the West is that Cuba is on it's on his last legs, that it's up against, that it's all collapsing, it's all coming apart. And of course, the situation is increasingly desperate and is increasingly problematic due to the energy blockade and due to the decades of economic blockades, and which are imposed not just by the United States on its own trade and its own actions with Cuba, but that they impose on third parties around the world. This situation is, of course, very bad, but the Cubans are resisting it. I mean, the notion that they're sort of just sitting back and accepting their quote-unquote fate is simply false. And there is a global solidarity movement to, try to help them resist this appalling, cruel, and what can only be called genocidal actions, these actions by the United States. And recently, of course, in the last few days, hundreds of people, including folks like the Irish band Kneecap, Medea Benjamin from Code Pink, Jeremy Corbyn, former leader, of course, of the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, Vic Mensa, a well-known American rapper. They've arrived in the island along with hundreds of others and have brought hundreds of thousands of dollars in humanitarian aid, as well as things like solar panels. And while these steps are clearly not enough, they're very positive, and they can only be encouraged. In fact, on the left chapter, we had an article, "Why I'm Going to Cuba," by Leonardo Flores. Leonardo Flores is a Latin American policy expert and campaigner with Code Pink. And what he was saying, he was traveling to Cuba for the first time on March 21st with this Nuestra America convoy. And he, as he noted, the U.S. had been blockading oil, seizing and chasing away Cuban-bound tankers in the Caribbean, etc. In addition to which, it's been doing saber rattling. Trump, in one of his more appalling, overtly imperialist and America first kind of moments, said that he could pretty much do anything he wanted with the country. The Cuban president responded by basically telling him to fuck off. But what he was saying in terms of going to Cuba is, he says that one of the most important things we can do, and the first reason I'm going to Cuba, is to offer material aid in the form of donations and travel. And he says that those who can should travel to Cuba. Now, the message from congressional Republicans in the United States, he notes, is no oil, no travel, no oxygen. And so if you go to Cuba, you are doing something that is small but meaningful, and what he describes as an act of defiance in the face of an empire gone mad. And of course, he notes that not all of us can do this. I mean, I personally, for example, both because of personal commitments and for financial reasons, I can't do this. But that all of us as individuals together in our communities, as he says, our movements and our organizations, can help to send people to Cuba and can donate to those going to Cuba or to various efforts to send aid to Cuba. And, you can go on the Left Chapter's Facebook page or the website to find ways to do this, or you can just Google it and check it out through things like Nuestra America or Code Pink. There are many organizations trying to put things together to aid in this cause, and it's one that we need to, embrace. Cuba has, as I said before, Cuba's always been there for the rest of the world. And it is time for the rest of the world to be there for Cuba, to step up, to stand up and be counted, to take the steps that each of us can take to put pressure on politicians in our home countries, to make the donations we are able to make to the level we're able to, or if we are able to take steps to visit Cuba and to stand with the Cuban people directly, and to bring aid and to bring defiance on our own individually when, where, and if possible. The Cubans have survived over 60 years of attacks from the United States. They've survived assassination attempts. They've survived the poisoning of their crops. They've survived economic warfare, psychological warfare. They've survived diplomatic pressure by the United States on their neighbors. And I believe that the Cuban Revolution will survive this. But it won't do it on its own. It needs international solidarity. It needs people to rally behind it, both emotionally, ideologically, in writing, and in practice. And we can do this, and we must do this. And the time to do it is now. So if whatever you can do, however you can step up and stand with the Cuban people and with the Cuban Revolution in the face of this disgraceful, genocidal, cruel, vicious onslaught by Trump, that psychotic piece of shit, Marco Rubio, and the rest of the demented right-wing American political class, most especially in Florida. Whatever you can do, this is the time to do it. On what is admittedly a more minor note, I did want to talk briefly also about the race for the leadership of the new Democratic Party in Canada. For those of you outside of Canada who aren't really familiar with the NDP is Canada's sort of equivalent of the UK Labour Party. It's a social democratic party, of course, with the one major difference being that outside of various Canadian provinces, the New Democratic Party in Canada federally has never held power, other than by backing various liberal governments in minority parliament situations. And I wouldn't exactly call that holding power, but I suppose they held the balance of power a few times over the years, including recently. At any rate, the leadership race in the NDP increasingly looks like it's going to be won by Avi Lewis, which is an interesting fact, and I'll get to that in a moment. But before I do, I wanted to say that recently, my very close friend and comrade, Gabriel Haythornthwaite, he wrote a superb analysis of the situation that the New Democratic Party finds itself in, how it got here, and the farcical sort of pantomime reactionary liberal shit show that the New Democratic Party is, in an article on the left chapter called NDP Chickens Come Home to Roost on the Carney Farm, that sort of takes as its beginning the defection of the recent defection of the NDP's MP for Nunavut over to the Carney Liberal government, a mere days after she had gotten up on stage and endorsed Avi Lewis for the leadership of the NDP, which is telling. It's certainly far more telling than Avi Lewis's supporters would have you believe. Now, I mean, Avi has, Lewis has tried to frame himself, and his supporters have tried to frame himself as sort of on the left of the party, as a radical who wants to push the party to the left, who wants to embrace sort of economic and left populism, who's, like Mandami in New York, or like Bernie Sanders, although, look at how that worked out, or Corbyn in the United Kingdom, that he's going to revitalize the party by taking it to the left. Meanwhile, at the same time, as it increasingly looks like he's going to win for a number of reasons, win the leadership on March 29th. He's also been trying to, I don't know, perhaps mend fences or, call himself a big tent candidate. And of course, you can't be a radical populist candidate and a big tent candidate at the same time. That's an inherent contradiction. It's an absurd framing. The only way you can be a big tent candidate in a party like the NDP is by, embracing the party's right. And the party's right has a long history of anti-democratic, reactionary, and liberal positionings. And, when you have somebody get up on stage to endorse Avi Lewis and then defect to the Carney Liberals a couple of days later, And when you have endorsements for Avi Lewis coming in from former Tom Mulcair supporters, Mulcair, who was without any question the most right-wing leader in the history of the NDP, you really see, the truth behind this alleged, insurgent campaign. The NDP actually, this leadership race did initially have an insurgent campaign in Eve Engler. The party didn't allow him to run. Then they didn't allow his partner to run when she stepped forward on the rather sexist and also, in this case, quite racist grounds that she was just a proxy candidate for him, despite the fact that she is quite a number of her own accomplishments and, in fact, worked on the LEAP project with Avi Lewis, but she was not allowed to run either. And so you have this situation where, people are trying to claim that Lewis is going to shake things up and is going to actually, bring democracy back to the NDP and push the NDP to the left. And yet, given that he was allowed to run and that these other candidates to his left were not allowed to run, given that folks like Lucy Watson and the cabal running the NDP didn't perceive him as enough of a threat to the NDP establishment to prevent him from running, as they have countless other candidates over the years for various levels of office within the NDP, that in and of itself tells you something. I've for a long time said that Lewis's campaign is a clear Nepo baby campaign. I mean, you can't, no meaningful leftist can make an argument against that. This is a party that alleges it's one of the major political parties in the country, and yet it looks like it's about to elect as a leader a person who has absolutely no parliamentary experience, has never actually won an election for anything, and who has no meaningful leadership experience within a political party. Which, to be honest, doesn't necessarily disqualify someone to lead a party for me, but it certainly disqualifies it for most people who would position themselves as backers of an electoral left or of an electoral social democratic party. And the only reason that he's on the verge of winning this leadership is his last name. I mean, that's just a fact. And there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that if he wasn't a part of the Lewis family with its long heritage of, as a first family of Canadian social democracy, that he would be under no consideration at all, given his own personal achievements one way or the other, be them as they may. But I mean, setting that aside, the campaign and its proxies have done very little but, punch left. They've certainly punched left significantly more than they have punched right in every meaningful sense. As I've already noted, Lewis has said that he wants to have a big tent party. Lewis has also, worked within a context where other left-wing candidates were disqualified from running, and he and his proxies did very little to prevent that. And of course, his online proxies, quite obviously and quite vigorously, went out of their way to try to encourage the blocking of Engler. So, when you see in practice what the campaign has done over the last few weeks, the way it's behaved, its duplicity, and the fact that it, has said one thing and then behaved in a way that's entirely counter to that, I wouldn't hold out any hope at all that Lewis will democratize the party if and when he wins. The indication that he is going to win is due to the fact that he's significantly outperformed all of the other candidates in terms of fundraising. Now, that could be mildly misleading. A lot of Lewis's support comes from sort of academic NGO, types within the sort of urban sections of the NDP. And they are, as a general rule, better off and have more money to donate, one would think, to Avi's campaign into his cause. So it is possible that the fundraising totals are misleading. But there are other indications. I mean, the fundraising totals were so far ahead of the other campaigns and the other indications that you see. I think it's quite likely that Lewis will win on the first ballot, and will win rather handily. But again, going back to the article by my friend and comrade Gabe, I really think everyone should read it, because I think it gives a very good outline of why the NDP is, an irredeemable party that has slid itself into the swamp of inescapable swamp of sort of reactionary social democracy and social imperialism. And I think that his argument, which ends with a call to once again put thought into and try to build and to organize towards creating a new left-wing party and movement within Canada that would help us get the horrible albatross that is the New Democratic Party off from around our neck. I think his analysis should be read in full. Obviously the article is not about how to go about creating this new left-wing party or movement, but it makes very strong arguments in the here and now as to why that is essential, why it should be a priority for leftists within Canada, and why we really need to, get moving on it sooner as opposed to later. Had all of the last, 20 years, or I would even say further, if you go back 50 years to when the last, from when the waffle came, the closest any left-wing movement has come to actually winning within the NDP. If you go back to that 50 years, if we had spent even a fraction of that last 50 years building a new left-wing political force and party in this country, as has happened in many other countries where left-wing forces have emerged to the left of mainstream social democracy, for example, like France Unbowed, which just unexpectedly swept the municipal elections, the first round of the municipal elections in France. Had we, and any number of other movements or parties in European countries, or for example, Quebec Solidaire in Quebec, had we spent the time building something like that, we would be far further ahead than we are now. And we would have quite probably have built a political force that could serve to push both the political spectrum in Canada to the left, and insofar as one is concerned about such things, push the New Democratic Party to the left, or get it to finally do what it should have done long ago, which is fold up its tent and merge with the Liberal Party, which in every meaningful sense it is only slightly to the left of. At any rate, those are my quick thoughts on the NDP leadership campaign as we head into its final week, and into what is looking like an Avi Lewis triumph. So, that wraps up the things that I wanted to talk about today. Love and solidarity to everyone out there. I hope everyone has a good whatever's left of their weekend. And, remember, solidarity with Cuba. It's the great imperative of our time, and it's an essential act that all of us can engage in. Thanks, comrades. Have a good afternoon.